You've tuned in to I Am Not a Number Live, the review show with Cardinal Sin and Captain Cockney Spock, where we review a different episode of The Prisoner starring Patrick McGoohan. Each week, we discuss a different episode and its implications then and now. Follow along and make sure to catch the episode in our viewing order so you can be ready to ask questions and participate in the chat. New episodes premiere each week on Wednesdays from 3 to 5 Central. The show's surreal and political implications on the reduction of the individual to a number have an even more insidious impact today, as all of our information, phone calls, texts, likes, photos, and other data are harvested to be sold and turn us into product rather than consumers. Get ready for a deep dive into one of the most important shows to have an impact on pop culture and society ever. And remember, I am not a number.
Greetings, followers. It is I, Cardinal Sin, and welcome to I Am Not a Number, number 3. And with me I have a very distinguished guest, Rick from the Unmutual website. Greetings, sir.
Hello. Thank you very much. Thank you very much for having me. I'm sorry that your regular host can't be with you, but it's great to be speaking to you and all of your listeners and followers. It's good to see so many names in the chat that I've come to know and love from your first two shows. So it's a genuine honor to be here with you.
Well, thanks very much. And I do appreciate your being here on such short notice.
No, it's quite all right. It's an absolute pleasure.
So let's see who we have in the chat. We'll scroll up a little bit here. Of course, you are here. Michael Beacom is here. Greetings. The Edge of Time. Hello. And various permutations. The Stream Elements bot is here, but the Stream Elements tip jar is not. Hail to the Edge of Time. Hail, Herc 130. And let's go ahead and dive right in. Rick, can you tell us a little bit about your experience working with remastering what is arguably the best show of all time?
Sure. Well, I got involved because I run a website called the Unmutual website, which is dedicated to the show and Patrick McGoohan and Port Merion, where the series was filmed. And in the mid-2000s, a company called Network here in the UK obtained the rights to all the kind of ITC, ITV shows. So as well as The Prisoner, they got the rights to Danger Man, The Saint, some of the Jerry Anderson shows like UFO.
Are they the ones that put out the Danger Man mega set?
They are responsible for the mastering for that set. What happens is a lot of companies like Shout Factory, A&E, Madman, they get the rights to release the various series. But what they're actually releasing is they're repackaging what the company Network have already created in the UK. So in the mid-2000s, Network got the rights to do The Prisoner. So they thought, do we just put it out on another DVD set where it kind of looks a bit grainy, a bit washed out? And they thought, no, let's completely go back to the original film elements, because it was, of course, filmed on glorious 35mm film. So they said, let's go back to the original film. We'll go back to the original negatives. We'll clean it up. We'll make it beautiful and pristine. And that's what they did in 2007. So they literally went back to the original film, went through it frame by frame, completely restored it, created a wonderful HD restoration, and I was very proud to be asked to sort of be a consultant on that particular box set. So I sort of proofed all the materials, which is on because that first box set came with an accompanying book as well, and then it was repackaged, of course, for the United States with A&E, repackaged in Australia by the company Madman. I think Shout Factory also did a different packaging of it, and then again in 10 years later, 2017. We decided to do the whole thing again because there were a few small glitches with that 2007 release. A bit of the sound was a bit shaky. A couple of the overdubs were slightly wrong. There's one of the intros had the wrong voice and so forth. So that was all cleaned up in 2017 for the 50th anniversary version, which sadly hasn't had an American releases yet. It's only available from the UK. But to accompany that beautiful restoration, we did text commentaries on every episode as well, all 17 episodes, which I wrote. So you've got the option of watching the episodes. I have for your shows here a kind of text commentary on the screen describing exactly what's going on in the scene, how it was filmed, who the actors and actresses are in that particular scene, any continuity errors that appear. So we really gave it a fresh new look, because you couldn't really improve on the visuals of the series. It was so beautifully restored in 2007 when we did the 40th anniversary. So when the 50th anniversary came along, Network said to me, what can we do that's different? So I suggested these text commentaries. So you have, as well as the beautiful episodes, you have the entire production story alongside it as well. And I think we really do need to thank Network for doing this, because without them doing it, A&E can't then release it in the States, which is what the guys that did it over there. And what you're seeing on Amazon Prime at the moment, that I know you've watched, the beautiful HD restoration there is again Network's restoration. So Network as a company literally got hold of the original 35mm film negatives, ran it through the machine and cleaned up every sort of frame. And in the 2007 release, they did the same with the alternative version of the first episode, Arrival. And they've got a featurette as to how they remastered that, so you can actually see how they did it. And as I say, I was very honoured to be asked to contribute in a small way to the 2007 set and act as a consultant, if you like, on the release, but more importantly with the 2017 set, to provide all the text commentaries alongside the HD restoration as well.
Very good, very good. It is an incredible restoration. It really looks like it was made yesterday. I have the Blu-rays of, I guess, the 40th anniversary that Shout Factory made.
That's exactly what it would. I think it's A&E or Shout Factory, I think you said, have produced the discs. And that's exactly, what they do is the Network then sub-license all the various regions. So the A&E, but it's exactly the restoration that was done in 2007. And it looks like, you said it yourself, and I think Tracy said it last week, it looks like it was made yesterday. It's so beautiful, the colours are really rich. Funnily enough, there's some negatives with that as well, because it means you can see every little imperfection. If somebody's makeup's not quite right, or somebody's costume is not quite right, or there's a car that's in the background that you wouldn't see on video or wouldn't have seen. Spots like that, but that's all part of the fun, I think, of an HD show.
Definitely. And we do have also with us Darius Munchausen. Hail. And glad that you are here, sir. And my co-host says that he is having difficulty with the link. So we will continue on. I did want to welcome Captain Cockney Spock.
Thank you, and hello.
Hello. So our episode, of course, this week is the Chimes of Big Ben. And Rick, what can you tell us about the Chimes of Big Ben?
Okay, well, it was one of 4 episodes which were written to be the second episode. Patrick McGoohan had already asked George Markstone and David Tomlin to write the first episode together, Arrival, and then he wanted some more episodes to be written. So he put 4 episodes together. One that he wrote himself, which is Free for All. He asked Vincent Tilsley to write an episode number 2, which is Chimes of Big Ben. He asked Anthony Skeen to write an episode 2, and that ended up being Dance of the Dead. And he asked Gerald Kelsey to write an episode 2, which is Checkmate. So we have already contributing to this viewing order, episode order debate that I'm sure is going to take over this show every week. We already have 4 episode 2s. In the end, they decided to go with this one. I don't know how you feel about whether it's a perfect episode 2. For me, it seems to come a little bit soon after Arrival that all of a sudden he's, spoiler alert, managing to get out of the village again. I think it's nice to have a little bit more of him being stuck there. But it was written by Vincent Tilsley. It was written before anything was shot for the series. So none of
Right.
Arrival had been shot by the time this was written. So this was written at a time when Rover wasn't even a balloon. It was still a sort of go-kart prototype idea with a flashing light on top, which was what Rover was originally supposed to be. So a lot of the elements in the original script, if you read them, are very much about a machine hypnotizing people rather than the smothering balloon that we see. Vincent Tilsley was very happy with how he wrote the episode, and he actually came up with the idea backwards. He thought of the last scene first. What would happen if he's in a replica of his office, and built the whole episode around that scene. He then went on to write one more episode for the series, which is Do Not Forsake Me, Oh My Darling. And it was actually the 5th to be filmed, although it was written as an episode 2. Chimes of Big Ben was filmed 5th, back to back with Once Upon a Time, which of course was the penultimate episode. So that's why you see Leo McKern twice. He filmed both his episodes back to back, and they kept one episode back, which is Once Upon a Time. Well, that was filmed 6th. We know they kept that back to be the penultimate episode. Originally, it was felt that this could be the end episode of season 1 of The Prisoner. So the first season would end with Once Upon a Time. As we know, in the end, they decided just to put out 17 episodes and made the last few episodes in a bit of a rush. So they held back Once Upon a Time to be the penultimate episode, and then a finale was added to it. But it was filmed back to back with Chimes of Big Ben, hence why you see Leo McKern looking very similar in his looks in both episodes.
And what do you know, Rick, about the alleged nervous breakdown that Patrick McGoohan sort of forced Leo McKern into having?
Yeah, and it's well documented, and Leo McKern, I think, pretty much admitted that he broke down on this. I mean, if you watch Once Upon a Time, it really is the most incredibly intense television experience. It's like a two-handed theatre production, isn't it? The intensity that the two actors, it's a real tour de force of acting, I think. And it simply was too much for Leo McKern. McGoohan tells this wonderful story when he was interviewed by Warner Troyer for Canadian television in 1977. Tells the story that he went to Leo McKern's dressing room, and Leo McKern was curled up in the fetal position, just saying, "Go away, go away. You know, I've had enough. Go away." And the years later, Network, who of course we put out the beautiful Blu-ray releases, interviewed Leo McKern. And he said that Patrick McGoohan was just like a tyrant. He was a bully, is how Leo McKern described him. Constantly, I mean, you can see it in the performance. The two of them are really, you do wonder where the acting stops and the reality begins when you see the two actors in Once Upon a Time. So
you really do.
And Leo McKern did have a breakdown during the filming of that episode. He's a different performance, isn't it, to Chimes of Big Ben? In Chimes of Big Ben, it's a very jovial number 2. He's very
very confident, very in control.
Very much so. In Once Upon a Time, much less so. He's under pressure as a character, number 2, in Once Upon a Time. And I think that pressure comes from Leo McKern being under pressure with his performance.
Yeah, I think it's really interesting. In the previous 2 shows that we did with Tracy Torme, I did some research that mentioned that various people on the production referred to Patrick McGoohan as intimidating. Not just intense, but intimidating.
Yeah, a lot of people. It's you get one extreme to the other. You speak to people who worked on The Prisoner, and they either loved him and thought he was a genius and they would have done anything for him, or on the other end of the scale, you get people that really didn't get on with him well. There were periods in the production where he was very intense. He was under a lot of pressure because he was the executive producer as well as the star. He was rewriting the scripts. He was in the cutting rooms at 11 o'clock at night, literally telling
17,
the editor,
18 hours a day.
Exactly, yeah. Telling the editor to wind the film back, cut this bit out, put that bit in. He was sleeping at the studio. As the time went on, he was drinking a lot more. I think it's fair to say that he was really under pressure to get it finished.
And he was already a hard drinker.
He was, yeah. He was very much so. And I think the problem was that he didn't suffer fools gladly. I'm not saying that everyone that crossed his path in a negative way was a fool, but he was a perfectionist. And if he felt that someone wasn't quite with it, wasn't quite putting their all into the project like he was, then he would come down on them. And there are episodes where he fell out with people. He sacked directors on their first day on the job. The episode of Change of Mind, the director lasted one morning before he was sacked and McGowan took over. McGowan did like to be in control. And if he felt that he couldn't trust someone with a job, he'd get rid of them, or he might keep them on, but he might make their life more difficult. I think that's true of actors, and I think that's true of people behind the scenes as well, because he wanted it to be a perfect product. At the end of the day, this show wasn't Danger Man. He wasn't just doing the acting. This was his baby. This was his creation. He wanted it to be absolutely perfectly done in front of the camera and behind the camera. And if he felt that people weren't putting their weight, he'd let them know. And I think fair play. It was his reputation was riding on this series.
Yeah, absolutely. And just to get into the story a little bit, one of the first things that I noticed is that the woman says good morning over the PA and gives the weather forecast, says that the fine weather will continue for at least another month. And to me, this implies weather control, which means complete control by the state, whoever state it is. And I think this is overlooked as it happens so early and it's in such a blasé fashion. It's really insidious. It implies that whoever is running the village has complete, total control of the environment, which doesn't bode well for number 6.
Yeah, I think you're spot on. I think that's a great observation, and I think there's only one episode where we actually see it rain, and in all the other episodes there are kind of references to, there might be light intermittent showers later on in the day. I think in Arrival that line comes out. But you're right, they're living in a world where everything is completely controlled. The media is controlled, and even as you say, the weather is controlled. We very rarely see children. We very rarely see animals. There's a cat that pops up once or twice, and there's the occasional bird.
This is very much a constructed, put together reality.
Very much so, very much so. And that ties into whether you believe a theory that it is, and Tracy referred to this, I think, in your earlier shows, as to whether it is all in number 6's mind, in which case it would be a totally controlled environment, or whether if you take it as the village is a real environment, it's not a dream sequence, then you're absolutely right. It's an absolutely controlled environment. I mean, when you look about society now, the weather's about the only thing that can't be controlled by our government. Everything else is, whether you live in the States or whether you live in the UK, as I think Captain Cockney Spock referred to last week and the week before as well on your show. The village is all around us already. We live in the village. Patrick McGowan was just the first one to recognize that and put a TV show on about it.
Yeah, and especially with COVID, now everyone lives in the village, really.
Yeah, you're absolutely right. And I think Michael Beacom's made a very fair point on the chat that he feels that it could be alien based. And I think you made the point, Cardinal, last week, that Rover seems to be an alien technology rather than something you would be likely to see on Earth. I think it might have been Captain Cockney talking about it. So that is a theory, isn't it? It's an alien-controlled environment in some way, or at least the technology is not of this Earth.
Yeah, I think that Rover is supposed to have a sort of otherworldly atmosphere. And very menacing, obviously. I'm interested to see what the captain's thoughts are about that.
So many thoughts. It can't be a dream because of the same reasons as Total Recall. There's areas that are not seen by the main character, the protagonist, and so if there's stuff happening where you're not there, it can't be a dream.
Yeah.
And this we learned from the trope of the unreliable narrator, of course.
Oh, that's a different one altogether, isn't it? I don't think. Is there a unreliable narrator trope in this one?
No, but if you're seeing something that none of the other main characters are seeing, it can't be an unreliable narrator. There's obviously an omniscient narrator, although number 6 doesn't know that.
Right, and so if you're seeing something outside, yeah, basically it's the theory that Total Recall's a dream gets ruined by the fact there's scenes outside of Quaid's perception.
Yeah, I have to agree with Captain Cockney Spock. It's not a theory that I subscribe to, or that indeed Patrick McGowan particularly subscribed to either. So I don't think the whole thing is a dream. And also, there are things that one cannot do in dreams. Have you ever had a dream that you're having a fight? You can't land a punch in your dream. And
no, but I learned how to have lucid dreams when I was very young, because my father taught me how. He used to literally, when he was dreaming, sit in a theater and eat popcorn and watch the dream like it was on a movie screen.
Okay. I'd love to be able to have more control over my dreams, I'll tell you.
Yeah. And Michael Beacon says, I've long held that the answer to which side runs the village, there's a third possibility, aliens, technology beyond belief. And that's a very interesting idea. That would make it a science fiction film series even more than it is now.
What's your thoughts when you watch The Prisoner, Cardinal? Do you feel that that the village is run by number 6's own side, or do you feel it's run by the other side, whoever that may be, whether that be the Russians?
Personally, I think that it's run by both sides. I think that they have all of their retired spies who didn't give a reason, or are maybe the stuff in your head is too sensitive to let you out of our sight, that sort of thing. I mentioned last week about the Danger Man episode Colony 3. You familiar?
Yes, very much so. It's one of my favorite Danger Man or Secret Agent episodes, and it is, as you say, very much a precursor to The Prisoner. They're in a village that's a retirement place for spies who know too much, essentially, which is what the Prisoner's all about, really.
Yeah, it seems like the prototypical episode for me, and where maybe Patrick McGowan got the original idea, which he pitched, when he said, I don't want to do any more Danger Man.
I think that certainly gave him ideas. Patrick also always maintained that he'd been having this idea in his head for years about it wasn't anything as specific as what does a secret agent do when he resigns and gets abducted. It was just about the idea of a man in isolation. McGowan always had this fascination with people being isolated and how that makes them behave. And he said that as early as 1959, when he first went to Port Merion, and he saw this amazing place when he was filming the very first episodes of Danger, he thought that place gave him inspiration, because he felt, I've got this idea. I want to do something about a man in isolation. He needs to be here. So if you add all these little elements together, man in isolation, Port Merion, what happens to spies when they know too much, you then are building up into what the Prisoner is, aren't you? Each of those, there's not one element that made him make the Prisoner. There's all these little bits added together. I think Captain Cockney Spock mentioned last week, very much so, you also need to bear in mind that it was McGowan was resigning from Danger Man, and you could all argue to some extent that the Prisoner is about McGowan, just as much about McGowan as it is about the spy in the show.
Absolutely. So at the beginning of the episode, it looks like we see the new number 2 from Arrival is in the office with Leo McKern, the new number 2 for this episode, and a damned good one he is too. He's ready to break number 6 from the very start. He's just dead set to break number 6. Although, like you said, Rick, he's very jovial. He's, at least to his face, trying to get along with him, trying to be friends with him, trying to bring him onto his side, even though in the previous episodes he said, I'm on our side.
Yeah. There's a very cold under the performance of Leo McKern, though, isn't there? He's being jovial, yes, as you say, to his face he's being jovial, but there's little bits. There's a bit where they're joking about number 6 making him a handle for the electronic doors, and all of a sudden he says, "You'll be back," whimpering, and that's the steel that's underneath that number 2. I think is a great performance by Leo McKern. If you asked a lot of Prisoner fans who is your favourite number 2, he'd win a lot of the votes.
Oh, absolutely.
And I think it's a really interesting episode in that a lot of the early episodes, number 6 appears to be defeated, although he kind of wins at the end and doesn't get defeated. It's a defeat for number 6. He's gone all to the trouble of thinking he's escaped and he hasn't. And I think it's great how the series at the beginning wears number 6 down to a certain extent. A lot of the earlier episodes, especially the earlier ones to be made, involve number 6 being defeated in a sense. And funnily enough, when Lou Grade first pitched the series to the States, Michael Dann, who was head of CBS at the time, who was going to be buying the series, said, "I don't think people are going to like that number 6, this guy, this hero, gets defeated every week. I don't think people are going to like that." But I love that because you see the wearing down of the character, and you do wonder at what point is number 6 going to pop. And Leo
When
McKern
is he going to break? Yeah.
Leo McKern, I think, knows almost how to do it, and you can see that in the great interplay between the characters. There's a lot of great dialogue in the episode, isn't there?
There is. There are some wonderful lines in this episode specifically, but all throughout the series. It's very well written.
And that's great. That's a testament to the writers. There's not many series where you'd have a different writer. Practically every episode has a different writer. Patrick McGoohan wrote 3 off the top of my head. Patrick McGoohan wrote 3, I think. Anthony Skeen wrote 3. Vincent Tilsley wrote 2. Lots of people only wrote 1 episode. Gerald Kelsey, Roger Waddis, they only wrote 1 episode each. Ian Rakoff only wrote 1 episode. But yet you get this, it's like a patchwork quilt. All the pieces don't quite fit together, but yet they do to create a wonderful 17 episode series. I think if you'd only had 1 writer, I don't think you'd have had that variation as to the next week. It's kind of slightly differently surreal to the previous week.
Especially during the episode when Patrick McGoohan was gone filming Ice Station Zebra.
Yes, the same writer as wrote Chimes of Big Ben, Vincent Tilsley. You're quite correct. Patrick McGoohan wasn't going to be there, so they said we need to write an episode where the lead character isn't there, or the lead star isn't there. They originally came up with an idea that a traveling circus comes to town and someone does a magic trick and makes number 6 disappear. That was the original idea.
That might have even been better.
It might have been, because I think it's fair to say that Do Not Forsake Me, although I like it for various reasons, I love the music in it, it doesn't particularly work on some levels. It's kind of a fairly predictable sort of sci-fi romp. The guy playing number 6 isn't Patrick McGoohan, although much as we like Nigel Stock, it's not the same performance, is it? But I like the fact that the episodes do have so many different writers, because I think you do get a different level of surrealism in each episode.
Yeah, and I remember watching the episodes, on VHS, that the further down the rabbit hole we went, the stranger it got and the crazier it got. And as we go through this episode, instead of an ex-admiral, number 6 is playing chess with a general. And he asks the general, which regiment, which army? And in both cases, the general seems taken aback, as if it's uncouth to ask,
Yeah, there's a few episodes, isn't there, where people are astonished by number 6's individuality and how dare he ask normal questions which we would ask each other in everyday life. You can't do that in the village. As the saying goes, questions are a burden to others.
Absolutely. And it's almost like he's pushing the boundaries right away, because I think that he thinks that the general is just another person that didn't give up the information that they were looking for, or did, and stays there forever. Over breakfast, number 6 and number 2 trade barbs with each other, and number 6 is snarky, but he means everything that he says. And I think that number 6 is, at this point, also trying to crack number 2, which he does in every episode.
Yeah. They're both at it, aren't they? They're both trying to undermine the other person's character with a bit of wit and a bit of underlying cynicism. And it's say all throughout the series you get this great dialogue, but I think in this episode the two actors work so well together, don't they? That they really do sparkle in every scene that they're in together, and any scene that they're not in together isn't quite as good.
Yeah, absolutely. And one of the more insidious parts is, as we were talking about before, that Leo McKern's number 2 is really sort of trying to co-opt number 6 rather. He's trying to bring him over to his side, as in Arrival. We can even give you a position of authority. And all you have to do is play ball old thing, and just tell us what we want to know. And so in this case, he's sort of bringing him over to his side to watch the new number 8, as it were, to show him, I guess, sort of how the other side lives. Would that be appropriate?
Yeah, I think that's exactly right. He's trying to, and we see it again in the last episode, Fallout, which I won't spoil for anybody. But we see this again. It's a part of, things are better if you join us.
Yeah,
and I think Captain Cockney Spock came out with something, I think, in the last episode, which I thought was very interesting, because it was something which George Markstein, who was the story editor for the episodes, also came out with as a possibility, is that when he opens the curtains in Arrival and sees that he's in the village, it's not a look of horror, it's a look of recognition. It's almost a part of, I know about this village, but no, I don't want to be part of it, but I know what it is. And that
right.
You always wonder whether he knows more, number 6, about the machinations of what's going on than maybe he lets on. But then again, does he know what side he's on? He clearly doesn't, because this episode he's almost caught out by one of his former colleagues, who very nearly catches him out.
Indeed, yeah.
I think one of the reasons we get a great performance from Leo McKern is that he understood what Patrick McGowan was trying to do. And I've got a lovely quote here, which I hope you don't mind me reading to you, which I
please.
actually happened to find today. And I just happen to have it on my desk here now. So it's lucky that it was today of all days that I found the quote. Leo McKern, when he was interviewed, said, "We are all of us prisoners in one way or another, but only a minority managed to escape, not from physical conditions, which are easy to deal with, the more insidious conditions even sometimes, those of our own temperament, personality, and mental attitude." And I think that's the whole theme of the series, isn't it? We are all prisoners of our own making. I think because Leo McKern understood that, he was able to give a better performance. Some episodes, the number 2 actors don't seem to understand the series and have said since that they didn't understand it. And that comes across in their performance.
No, absolutely. And the same thing that happened to number 6 in Arrival is happening to the number 8 character. Number 2 is calling her over, come have lunch with me. Number 2 at the Green Dome. And now number 6 is watching through the big rear projection view screen, which is exactly what had happened to him in the previous episode. So, sort of by hook or by crook, we will, is exactly what's happening here.
Exactly, and it seems clear that this is how all the villagers are brought to the village. And it's interesting that for the second episode in a row, they're trying to use a femme fatale, a woman, to get sort of number 6 to kind of give up his secrets or whatever way you want to put it, which is interesting given that Patrick McGoohan as an actor was totally against the use of women in that way, and John Drake was never the womanizing secret agent, and Number 6 was never a womanizing secret agent. So it's interesting that he allowed so many women to double cross him or try and double cross him in The Prisoner, bearing in mind he didn't want anything to do with them on that particular level in his shows in the first place.
Yeah, he's so loath to, well, certainly to kiss any woman other than his wife as a person, that as an actor, he turned down the role of James Bond twice and The Saint, and
there are a few occasions where he did kiss another woman on screen. There's a few TV plays and the movie The Gypsy and the Gentleman. He ravages one of his co-stars on screen, but this was very rare. He always thought that it was a beautiful quote. I can't remember it exactly, but it was something along the lines of, when I'm on television, I'm a guest in people's homes, and therefore I should behave accordingly. Well, I think that's a great way to be honest. So he turned down Bond. He didn't like the womanizing. He didn't like the violence. He also thought the scripts were pretty bad. But I don't know whether your listeners would be aware, but it's an interesting fact. The original title of Danger Man series, when it was in pre-production in 1958, was James Bond, because 3 men originally were going to create the series. Ian Stewart Black, Ralph Smart, who was a producer at ITC at the time, and Ian Fleming was looking for a visual platform for his James Bond books. The original
did not know that
series was going to be called simply James Bond. It was going to be a small screen version of the Ian Fleming books. Now, as we know, it didn't happen. He went to Eon, and the films were made, and the rest is history. But originally, Danger Man was going to be called James Bond. It was going to be a 30-minute episodic version of the Ian Fleming books. Ian Fleming then said, no, this isn't going to work for me. Off he went to Eon to make the movies. They then retitled it Lone Wolf, and it was still going to be a womanizing, rough, tough James Bond type character. Then, of course, what happens? Lou Grade casts Patrick McGoohan. Patrick McGoohan says, I'm not doing that. This is going to be the secret agent with no guns and no girls. So then they thought, well, we're going to have to call it something else. We can't call it Lone Wolf. And that's hence why Danger Man was born. So for those that don't know, Danger Man was originally going to be James Bond.
Captain, did you know that?
I didn't. I'm trying to reconcile the fact that he doesn't like kissing girls because it's rude, but he's quite happy to shout at everyone because he's the director. It doesn't quite make sense.
Yes, it's the ultimate irony, isn't it? Of we really need to behave well. But he only ever said, I need to behave well on screen. At no point did he say that off screen we need to.
Yeah, I think he's got it the wrong way round. I like my TV stars to be rough and tumble, beaten. I like them murdering people on screen, being polite as anything off screen. I had it on the show a couple of weeks. I had some co-host shouting at me, and I asked the person afterwards, why is that guy so shouty? Oh, he's a director. He likes shouting at people. Well, he's not my director. You know what I mean? He directs politely.
Yes. And as I say, when you speak to people who work with McGoohan, it's one extreme to the other. They either loved him and thought he was great and never had a problem with him, or they absolutely hated him and hated the way he treated people. And I think a lot of it comes down to he didn't suffer fools gladly. He wanted his product wanted his product to be a perfect product. It was his name on the show, as I think Michael Beacom said in the chat earlier on. So it needed to be right.
I mean, this is arguably less about The Prisoner and more about management styles, but I like a manager that doesn't suffer fools gladly, and I like a manager that's a perfectionist, but I don't like an angry manager that can't keep their temper and uses bullying as a way to get their stuff done. I think the ideal manager doesn't suffer fools gladly, but simply fires them calmly if they can't do their job after several verbal and written warnings. Once you've lost your temper, which I've done myself, you've just lost the plot. You've just shown yourself to be an amateur.
I think we'd all agree with that in life.
Given away your control.
Yeah, if Patrick McGoohan couldn't keep, so personally, and we're all human, but I think the best manager, I like the perfectionism without the temper. That is your ideal manager. They are quite rare, but there's the thing. I do like the perfectionism, but I don't like the temper so much.
Well, he created arguably the greatest TV show ever made. So did he do the right thing? If he'd have been nice as pie to everybody, would he have got the same product?
Who knows?
It's a very good point. Very good point.
Yeah, I guess he did what he did to create the product he gets. So under Chaos Theory, if he'd done anything differently, we would have got completely different products. So you got me there.
But then again, the flip side of that is where did his career particularly go after The Prisoner? Yes, he did some great episodes of Columbo, as Cardinal Sin reminded us all in his intro last week's episode. But Patrick McGoohan could have been the world's greatest, most famous actor, as you say. He turned down Bond twice. He was the Britain's highest paid TV star when he was Danger Man. The Prisoner is arguably the greatest show ever made, but did he do much after that? A couple of episodes of Columbo, Braveheart, he was great in that.
A ton of films.
That's the sadness of someone that had great potential. What if George Lucas had made more Star Wars films? What if Steve Jobs had actually taken that cancer treatment, and then I might have an iPhone with a spell check that fucking works properly?
Those would both be better episodes, Captain, than the Disney What If that we're getting.
Well, yeah, I like your one, Cardinal Sin. What if stories were actually what if stories?
Yeah, what if Disney What If was actually Marvel What If?
Yeah, what if was actually what if, but it isn't what if, it's something else entirely. It's not what if.
Yeah, it's just a political identity politics driven agenda.
But I guess but looping back to where we were, I guess I think Patrick McGoohan hypothetically deserved more recognition afterwards, which is why I'm glad we've got this show. I guess whatever timeline we're in, and it does seem increasingly like Clown World, but it was predicted by the Prince. So I guess whatever methods, perfect or imperfect as they may be, I am happy that the Prisoner is pretty much a perfect show. And on these rewatches, it's dated very well. And as you both alluded to earlier, it seems to anticipate the world that we're in even better than when it was being filmed. It's very ahead of its time, I think.
Yes, certainly more topical now than ever. And
I've got a lot of respect for. Sorry to interrupt, Cardinal. I've got a lot of respect for McGoohan though, because he could have been a massive star, but he wouldn't play the game. He wouldn't play the media game
by his rules. Yeah.
Right.
He could have been he was very wealthy. His wife was in real estate, so I don't think he had any problems with. It's not that he did it for the money, but he could have been in massive movies. But I don't think he wanted to sell his soul in that way. I think he had his rules and he had his principles, and if that meant he didn't, win Oscars or wasn't on the front page of Variety or whatever. I've got a lot of respect for him for that. He wanted to do things his way, and he wanted to do things the moral way.
If only actors were like that today.
Well, there will never be another McGoohan. That's for sure.
No, that's certainly true.
There will never be another Prisoner, a series like The Prisoner. A series like that couldn't get made today for a start. Because it go through 400.
I mean, they've tried. They've done things like Lost, which was an absolute crash and burn failure as far as I'm concerned.
Yeah, first series. Great,
when they try and put together the mystery and the second guessing of The Prisoner into modern television, it inevitably flops. It fails.
Actually, there is a bit of a link with Lost and The Prisoner, because the whole idea is what's happening at the end. Do they know the ending? Do we know the ending? Have the writers figured out the ending? So that's although I think The Prisoner has more of a satisfying ending than that damn Lost.
And it does, and it didn't take them 60 odd episodes to do it either. He managed to do it in 17.
Yeah.
17. Right.
5 series of Lost, or however many there was, waiting for an ending that just
lost the plot more, like I gave up after 2.
Yeah. How do we pronounce George's last name? The story editor.
Mark Stein.
Mark Stein.
Mark Stein is how I would pronounce it. But Mark Stein is absolutely fine. It's just an accent thing. I wouldn't worry about.
My understanding is that George Markstein actually worked in the intelligence services.
Well, that's an urban myth. He didn't. He was a journalist. He had a great interest in intelligence services as part of his journalism. It's a bit of an urban myth that he actually did work in the intelligence services. But he did do a lot of undercover kind of work into these places, which were real places where spies would go when they knew too much. There's a place in Scotland called Anvil Lodge, which was used in the war for spies to go and rest in between assignments where nobody could find them, and it was like a mini sort of prison. where they all slept in a cell at night, where nobody could get to them and torture them for their secrets or whatever. And Mark Stein did a lot of research into that. And a lot of that forms the basis of what we see on screen as The Village. He'd done a lot of research throughout his journalistic career, beginning on local newspapers like the Southport Guardian, and then moving on to military stuff like Stars and Stripes and the UK Eagle and publications like that. He did a lot of research into those types of establishments. So a lot of what we see on screen in Arrival and the building of the village, although McGowan was kind of the allegorical side of things in terms of what we see in The Prisoner, Mark Stein should get a lot of credit for coming up with a lot of the kind of what happens to these people in reality. The reality that you see in The Prisoner, a lot of that came from Mark Stein. The allegory definitely came from McGowan. If you take McGowan's allegory out, you just get a kind of fairly good spy show about a man who's in prison and doesn't know where he is. You add McGowan's allegory to it, then you get The Prisoner. The two ideas meshed together are what makes The Prisoner what it is. I think it would have been a kind of not quite as good a series if you'd have lost either one of those two people, to be honest.
Yeah, I agree. And so in the beginning of the episode, the new number 8 is brought by helicopter to the island and taken by a stretcher to the house next to number 6's. And she's here to recuperate. But is she a plant or is she a prisoner? Something to think about, I think.
Are we going to do spoilers at this stage or not?
I'd like to keep it to the episodes that we've seen. So this one and
I know, I mean within episodes. Well, spoiler alert, there's a twist at the end.
Yes, there is. Yeah.
Well, may I basically, I'm asking a question, but I'm really leaning towards the answer. Is anyone offended if I just go ahead and spoil the episode? I mean, you guys have watched it, right?
I don't know how many people that are in the chat have watched the episode, or how many people that will watch the our episode.
I can wait. I guess chronologically, I can save my analysis. I guess. Well, there is a twist coming, so
it's just more of a rhetorical question, really, at this point.
All right, I guess I can say it really got me thinking about twist endings and subverting your expectations, because obviously, famously with The Last Jedi, now subverting your expectations has become a bad thing. And so I do think, obsessively as a unpublished writer, that, the whole structure of the plot twist is kind of, you're leading the audience one way, and at the end you're going, ha ha ha, tricked you, we went this way. And then sometimes I'm watching the thing going, well, it's your movie, you're the one that tricked me. You know what I mean? So, so there is a twist coming, and it's nicely that they do go a long way, basically, to make you think something. I'm thinking, does that mean that he went, I'll have to talk about it later, but basically it gives it rewatch value, because then the second episode onwards, or beg your pardon, it is the second episode, depending on the view order, the second viewing onwards, you're obviously watching it, the whole thing, going, hang on a minute, I thought that this was this, but it's actually this. And so it does inherently give it a nice rewatch value, because then the second time round you actually understand the genuine relationship. So I like the aspect of post-twist. You can still enjoy the episode.
Yeah, and as I mentioned at the beginning, I think what's great about this is that the writer of the episode wrote the ending first and built the rest of the episode on the twist. So the twist was the first thing he came up with.
Which is how I write almost everything I write, whether I'm writing a screenplay or a short story, whatever. I always teach my writing students to write from the ending back, because that way where you're going.
Don't give it away. That's the biggest secret. Shh. Cardinal said nothing. La la la. Look over here. That's right. Start at the beginning, suckers. Cardinal, you've given away the biggest secret in writing, you genius.
Well, it's a free secret. I didn't invent it.
No, I had to discover it all on my own. But apparently Gone with the Wind, one of the few books that has been basically recorded as she started with the ending first. And obviously it's a classic. So that is a top writing tip out there you've just given away for free, Cardinal, you generous, lovely man.
Well, thank you. So despite the verbal jousting while they're watching her on the screen, there's a kind of camaraderie between number 2 and number 6, as if they're working together. Number 2 has number 6 watching along with him, listening to him. And again, the prisoner isn't buying it. He's not convinced. he puts on an act like he's cooperating.
Yeah,
But they're going to have to do a lot more than that to persuade him.
At this point, I caught myself just reading into things too much, but then I realised the prisoner's so clever it makes your brain work and see things that might not be there. Am I reading into it too much by thinking, 2 and 6 are working together, 2 plus 6 equals 8?
I think you have something there.
See, that's the thing. I don't know, and I just realised that is the beauty of the prisoner right there, because I don't even know. But it's like with watching Kubrick. Oh, he moved that typewriter. Was that deliberate? Once your brain is questioning the deliberate actions or not of everything, you know you've got a smart show, because you're already. It's like chess game. You're thinking, are the writers thinking that? So whether it was deliberate or not, you know, if Patrick McGowan were here, he might go, yeah, totally, that's right. It was deliberate.
Especially with Kubrick, I think that you can say that everything that's in the frame is intended to be there.
That's a different typewriter. Exactly. If that's Michael Bay, you go, well, obviously they loaded the wrong CGI. Yeah. But when it's Kubrick, like, he's fucking with our subconscious, isn't he?
And I think the same can probably be said with Patrick McGowan. Rick, what do you make of the eye here? What is this about?
The all-seeing eye. I mean, this is just another reference, isn't it, to being under constant surveillance. The all-seeing eye, all around us, and I think you touched upon it in last week's show, where CCTV is everywhere. We are watched our every move, apart from in our own home. But how if people might look back on this in 50 years' time and say, well, we do have cameras in our own home. How quickly is that going to be the case? And I think that's what that eye does. It's a constant reminder that everyone in the village.
I've got one right there.
Yeah, exactly. We all have. There we go. That's right there. Look.
Yeah.
It's because number 6 is being watched every minute, because whoever is in charge knows what he is doing every minute of the day, and that is true.
Herc 130 says Kubrick. Every frame of painting.
Somewhere there is an algorithm that knows what I bought from the shops last week. It therefore knows what to advertise to me on social media tomorrow. It knows where I'm going every time I go out in my car, how far I've gone, and that's what Patrick McGowan was saying back in '67. That eye symbolises the fact that we are completely not controlled, because we can all to some extent do what we want to be able to do, but those in charge know exactly where we are and what we are doing. And that eye that moves round is just a reminder that number 6 is being watched, as are we. The village is all around us. The prisoner was a show about, to tell us what life is about. It wasn't about one guy in one village. It was about all of us. We are all number 6, and the world is our village.
Yeah. And one of the things I think that Patrick McGowan was trying to get across was the dangers involved in what now has turned into the biggest voluntary surveillance system in the history of the world.
We also need to be careful of the old, as we were talking about a couple of minutes ago, about reading things into things which aren't there. And Patrick said that when we talked earlier on about the Blu-ray releases, which I was very proud to contribute to. When Patrick was contacted in 2007 with the first Blu-ray release, he'd already done lots of interviews about the prisoner, and he said he was never going to do any more. And a network said to him, would you speak to us? And he said, I'm not going to do an interview this time, and I'll tell you why. If it hadn't come across in the 17 episode what it's about, I'll be wasting my time trying to explain to you what it's about. It means I've failed. If I have to explain it to you, I've completely failed. It's all there on the screen, but he was very careful to say, don't read into things that aren't there, because it is all perfectly explained. Those 17 episodes don't require you to be too deep. It's obvious what the show is about.
If you perfect.
Get that, then you're wasting your time. Then I'm wasting my time telling you is how he basically put it across.
I must say, that is music to my ears. That is basically, Yeah, because that's what we're talking about on our channels the whole time. Two things there is, one of them is death of the author. In other words, I personally love hearing about the views of the writers, the directors about their movies. But at the same time, I do respect death of the author. If I need the director to be on my Blu-ray commentary to explain something, it's a double-edged sword because I like it personally for curiosity, but I shouldn't need it, because if you do need, basically I'm repeating what you're saying, if I need the director to explain the movie to me, they've not done their job. So quite right. But at the same time, he's also saying he's denying headcanon, and this is something that's coming up on my channel and the Cardinals a lot, is when we're talking about a movie, whether it's Blade Runner or Star Wars, I'm not going to go into it now, Cardinal, is people go, oh, well, I like to think it's X, Y, Z. I'm like, no. Headcanon is bad. It's suspension of disbelief. The central premise of all cinema, all fiction, is suspension of disbelief. You go in there and you believe it. I could pick apart, the Death Star's not really very realistic, or in the Prisoner,
although,
or are those
Captain,
bubbles?
I will say this.
Yes.
There are a lot of movies specifically where they get the audience so hyped up and thinking about what's going on that when the movie lets out, people are milling around talking to one another about, what do you think this meant and what do you think that meant. So to a degree, I think art is in the eye of the beholder. Ooh. And of course there's also authorial intent. They're both valid. I think
this is what I'm here for. This is what I'm talking about. That it's a very fine line, but it is key. Authorial intent is key, because if we all apply headcanon, I made an example yesterday on one of the shows, and I think Spidey was on there, went, ow, and it's quite a serious point, but bear with me. In Germany, Holocaust denial is a crime. Now, where am I going with this? Well, it's the same thing. Once you've got suspension of disbelief, because I've been having these debates, and people have actually said to me on my show, this movie's a work of fiction. I'm like, wow, is it a work of fiction? But I got beyond my sarcasm. I thought, right, well, that's the strength of suspension of disbelief. Once I'm in that movie, it's not fiction. And therefore, increasingly, I'm talking about history. When we're studying history, we don't allow a headcanon for history. Oh, I think the pyramids were this. Well, I think they were that. I don't care. What were the pyramids? Who built them and why? Again, we won't get into that now. But it's the same thing. Once you've got suspension of disbelief, it's not for me to imagine what I think the prisoner is. That's why I had to strictly think, because I like to think it could be a dream sequence. But if we have to erase it because it's objectively not there, it's not implied by the author, and it's not there on screen, then we have to scrub it out. Otherwise, we fall victim to headcanon, and everything's just a mush, and nothing means anything.
We have a difficult position though as prisoner fans, don't we? Because on the one hand, absolutely what McGowan said is right. If it's not there on the screen, then I'm not going to explain it to you, because it means
you didn't get it. Yeah,
exactly. Right. But at the same time, so much of the prisoner is draw from it what you want to draw from it.
Yes,
that's true.
So it's a difficult contradiction there. That on the one hand, yes, it is the central premise. For me, the central premise of the show is incredibly clear. We are all number 6. The whole world is the village. The village is representing the world that we live in, and number 2 and number 1, or whoever's in charge, is representing the world's governments. And we are all in our own world. We are all prisoners, because we build ourselves a prison around us in life. That's the central premise of the show. The little elements of it, we can take our own meaning from it. But what Patrick McGowan, I think, meant when he said, if you haven't got it, then I'm not going to bother explaining it to you, because some people just don't even get the central premise of it. There are prisoner fans out there, would you believe, that think that number 6 is the bad guy, and he's a troublemaker of some sort.
I can see that. Sure, yeah. Now, in this episode, first, number 2 tries to strike a deal with number 6. Just tell me one thing and I'll release you. Why did you resign? Release me from the village. And number 6 walks away. And then number 2 says, if you insist on staying here, I do hope you'll make some effort to settle down. Try and take part in community life. And he gets number 6 to enter their arts and crafts exhibition. It's so important that the next morning that the lady on the announcement talks it up and mentions there'll be prizes for all 5 groups. And number 8, the new girl, asks number 6 for directions to the Green Dome.
Yep.
when she's at number 6's place, and he tells her, "Oh, it's across the street, down the lane. You can't miss it." And then she asks him for directions. Will you take me there? This, I think, is the first moment that you realize that she's more than she seems. It's sort of a dead giveaway that it's so easy to find, and yet she asks number 6 to sort of be her chaperone to take her there.
Right.
And already number 6 is responding to her the same way they responded to him when he asked the same questions. When she asks, "Where am I?" he says, "In the village." And she asks about the taxi service. "Where will they take you?" And he says exactly what was said to him in Arrival. "Anywhere you want to go, so long as you end up here." He doesn't trust her from the get-go. And he asks her in for a nightcap, and she responds like she doesn't know what that means. And he says, "Drink?" And she follows him into his bungalow. And as Patrick McGoohan was a hard drinker, the fact that all they have is non-alcoholic whiskey and vodka is sort of a torture all by itself.
Yeah,
and he
I
asks
did
her,
notice that. I couldn't stand here. I'm not a big drinker, but hearing the words non-alcoholic vodka, I started to weep inside.
yeah. And he asks her if she's Russian, and she says Estonian.
Estonian.
And number 2 asserts Russian. And she divulges that she worked for the government, but she doesn't say whose government. And
I like to point out my ignorance here. I didn't understand that. I realized they were getting at something, but I didn't get it. What was it with their to and fro?
Well, number 6 says immediately from which you resigned. And then she immediately changes the subject to number 2, and that she expected his assistant to be more charming. So she, he's acting so much like, a goody-goody that she thinks that he's on the side of number 2. And she acts like she's fed up with this interrogation. And when he calls her, number 8 says, "I am not number 8 or number anything else. My name is Nadia Rakowski," and leaves.
Yeah,
and
Nadia
number 6
Rakowski
dutifully tells her, "Be seeing you." And I particularly like how when number 2 joins number 6 at a table near the beach where Rakowski is sunbathing, number 2 says, "There are 2 kinds of people in the village. The kind that leave and the kind that stay, and I can tell that you're going to stay." And then number 2 says, "Has it ever occurred to you that you're just as much a prisoner as I am?" Which reminds me of later shows like The Wire and more straight-ahead prison shows where there are corrupt guards and wardens and favors of done, etc. And, of course, a lot of the time the inmates end up running the asylum.
Like on
True
the earth.
Yeah, which is true. With the idiots run the governments.
Yes.
And number 2's response is to number 6 is, "Oh, of course, I know too much. We're lifers." And so again, he's trying to sort of, establish that they're the same. And he goes on to say that it doesn't matter who number 1 is. It doesn't matter which side runs the village. In fact, both sides run the village. And I think this is dead giveaway number 2. This echoes the sentiment that would happen during the Soyuz Apollo docking in space. And there's been quite a lot of controversy that the space race was actually cooked up, and so was the whole Cold War, and that both sides were working together. In fact, the entire time the Soviet Union was our enemy, we were selling them grain for bread at a massive discount and providing them with supplies just like we did in World War II. We needed an enemy to prop up to justify the massive growth of the military-industrial complex, like Ike warned us about in his goodbye message.
Well, in a way, basically, Rick, what you were saying earlier about metaphorically it makes the Earth a village. Literally, in that episode, in that line of dialogue between Patrick McGoohan and Leah McKern, Leah McKern's character, number 2, says, "Yeah, the whole Earth is the village." So they're talking about literally making the planet as the village, which I think basically, reflects your metaphor. It's a metaphor now, and they want to make it literally happen.
And it has happened.
which we've seen with the whole New World Order thing, which, again, was so prescient in The Prisoner on so many levels. Number 2 says, as soon as both sides realize that they're looking into a mirror, they'll see that this is the pattern for the future. And boy, did that turn out to be true, right?
Indeed.
I mean, I think they were working hand in glove the whole time. All the proxy wars were just an excuse to make the weapons manufacturers ultra wealthy by selling weapons to both sides in all wars in the 20th century. I mean, look at what's going on now. The American government is making secret deals with the Taliban, left them a $6 billion air base, literally pallets of greenbacks, shrink-wrapped. We're talking billions and massive weapons caches. And they just walked away from them and left them, all the translators and people that had worked with the U.S. to the tender mercies of the new regime, which is already in power. And they didn't even bother with misdirecting us. They think that we're such ignorant sheep with blinders on.
Our taxes won't pay for books in our schools, but we're paying for Humvees for the freaking Taliban. You paid for that with your taxes, and so did I. Oh, it makes me mad. That's why we're doing Afghanistan wargaming this week on Captain Cockney Spot, because we're going to rewrite history. But no, it's right. They're not even hiding it. It's ridiculous. It's just funneling the money to Halliburton. But anyway, back to The Prisoner. But
when you were saying, Captain, that his hope is that the entire Earth will be like the Village.
Yes. The whole Earth is the Village.
He says, "What's yours?" And he asks number 6, who replies, "I'd like to be the first man on the moon," which was only 2 years away at the time the show aired. So then number 8 decides to go for a swim, and while she's swimming away, number 2 pulls up her file and says, "At 17, an Olympic bronze medalist." Then in number 2's office, he talks to the controller and asks how long the television range is, completely for our benefit, and the response is 2 miles, and then we have radar. Then, after he's had enough, number 2 calls for an orange alert, and by now we know that means release the hounds, or at least Rover. And at this time, Rover has 2 little rovers with him. Like so. And when we look at the next picture here, we see that the person that Rover or these rovers have aren't being swallowed whole and not going through the process of the elastic, being put against their face. And here we see the body is just sort of deposited, and when we first see number 8 back on the shore, we think, she's dead.
Studio set,
because she doesn't move.
There are only actually 2 scenes in that episode actually filmed in Port Mary, and that's all done in studio for those that are interested in the minutiae of how they make these things.
Wow.
I'm
sorry, say again, your audio dropped out.
Oh, I beg your pardon. Yeah, that particular scene that you showed there with the whole beach scene with the parasols and the tables and chairs and the 3 rowers, that was filmed in studio. There's only, I think, 2 scenes in Chimes of Big Ben that are actually filmed in the village, in Port Merion. The rest of them were filmed either on the back lot of MGM Studios, out the back of the studio, or in a studio set. And that what we see there is a studio set. Neither Leo McKern nor Nadia Gray, who played Nadia, ever went to Port Merion for filming.
Yeah,
they had me convinced.
It's amazing all the different backgrounds that they built on studio to make it look exactly the same. And as I mentioned, that's because if she'd been taken inside Rover, she probably would have been killed, which is not part of the plan. So even though she looks dead when the medical team gets to her, she's just stunned or something, or acting stunned maybe. And number 2 phones number 6 and tells him, "Meet me at the hospital," and watches number 6 go on the big view screen. And when they get there, we see number 8 in a culvert next to a table with a basin of water in it. And number 2 tells number 6 that every 4 seconds, the floor has an electric current run through it, and 4 seconds on and 4 seconds off. And number 8 is throwing water on the floor over and over again to sort of see, she's testing boundaries as well. And the water turns to steam when the current goes on. And she sees that she can make it to the door in 3 seconds. And number 2 insists if she can make it to the door without getting killed, then she can go. And I think this is another dead giveaway about what number 2 is trying to instill into number 6. If you'll just tell us this one thing, why did you resign? Then you'll be off and running and back home and all that kind of thing. And there's a tape loop that's asking her, what was in your mind? Were you trying to commit suicide? What was the purpose of your swim? What was in your mind? Suicide. So at least it looks like they're inflicting mental torture on her. And then she makes for the door in plenty of time and stops and says, kill me, kill me, kill me, kill me. And number 2, Leo McKern, yells, switch off, and says, well, I suppose we'll have to try something else, and appeals to number 6. Can't you help me? I really find this most distasteful.
Yeah.
So what's going on there?
Well, this scene. There's a scene in each of the first few episodes, which basically is there to show us as the viewer, and also it's to show number 6 as well, that they really will go to any end to get what they want. It is torture. It's exactly what it is. Completely against any sort of Geneva Convention. The village acts with total impunity. They can do what they want.
Rick, what we would call today extraordinary rendition, right?
Yeah.
It's the Welsh Guantanamo Bay.
We saw it in Arrival. Yes, exactly a good point, Captain Cockney Spot. We saw it in Arrival when he was in the hospital and he peered in the window and there was lines of people in straitjackets all lined up. And on the door it said aversion therapy, as if we're supposed to know what that means. But obviously they're being tortured or brainwashed in some way. They're all held captive, of course. And this is another example of that. You see it in Arrival. You see it in lots of other episodes as well, where basically they're saying to number 6, we can destroy your brain and destroy you and turn you into a vegetable if we want to.
Yep.
Brainwashed imbeciles is what number 6 calls them in one episode. And he could be easily one of them. And that's what they're showing with this scene. They're saying to number 6, we can do all these things. You need to come on side and help us, or we're basically going to kill this woman.
Yeah. And number 6's response is, you wanted a deal? I'll make a deal with you. Let her go and I'll collaborate. I won't tell you anything, but I'll join in, try to settle down, even carve something for your exhibition, which makes number 2 very happy. And he says, if I turn her over to you, you'll do some woodworking for me. That's your deal. And number 6 says, that's the best you'll get, which kind of shows who's really wearing the pants in this relationship, I think.
Power dynamics.
Yeah, absolutely.
I think what's interesting about that dialogue in that scene is that it's coming across again, and it happens again elsewhere in the episode. They don't necessarily want to know exactly why number 6 resigned. That's just a test question. They just want him on side. They want him as part of their regime. They want him to be with them. It doesn't really matter how he resigned. If he tells them that, or if he comes on board, they've won. And that's why
in fact, in this episode, he says it was a matter of conscience.
Yeah.
And that's all he says.
Yeah, and in Once Upon a Time, he also says, it was for peace of mind. So he does kind of already admit to that. And it's almost irrelevant for the village. They just want him on side. And Leo McKern's number 2 character is obviously very happy at this point because his plan is working. Number 6 is coming over. He is settling down so that he can look after Nadia. The village is winning at this point.
And number 2 keeps recording the headway he's making with number 6 directly in front of him, always logging File number 6, section 42, subsection 6, new paragraph 5, overweening sense of self-importance, while here his egomania has, if anything, increased. And he's doing this in front of number 6, like, you know, hello, I'm in the room.
I do like that, though, an increased sense of self-importance. What? I am the protagonist.
It's my show, after all. Yeah.
It's my fucking show.
And when number 6 and number 8 are walking through the forest in the area with the head-turning statues that have the eyes light up when they're being watched, I get the sense that rather than having surveillance on them, that number 2 and the controller would rather have been surreptitious. They actually want their subjects to know they're being watched. And number 6 mentioned that they can be seen but can't be heard. And the writer mentioned that he wrote several scenes in which number 6 and number 8 are talking about getting off the island, and that he originally wrote for them to be kissing, and he didn't realize that McGowan had such a hang-up about it. So instead, he got close to her, stroking her hair, side-hugging her close when they're walking along so that they can talk without violating McGowan's sort of more Catholic than the Pope issues about kissing women other than his wife.
That's exactly true. And if you look at that scene close up when they're doing the hair stroking, whatever, that's clearly not Nadia Gray, because the height is wrong and so is the hair. It's clearly somebody else in a wig.
I didn't realize that.
Yeah, it's a different woman. We've never come to deciding who it is. There was rumours that it was one of Patrick McGowan's daughters, but Catherine, the daughter, eldest daughter, has denied that it was her. So we don't know who the person is, but it's clearly not Nadia Gray. Obviously, he didn't want to be seen in that sort of clinch with his co-star.
Wow, that is strict.
Yeah, but we don't know who it is and what the reason was exactly, because it's not the sort of thing that Patrick would have ever come out and said. But that particular scene, yeah, it's not Nadia Gray. As I say, I think what's interesting as well for these scenes is that it's all done in the studio. Again, you wouldn't know, especially watching in black and white as the show was first shown in the UK. But as we watch it now, even on Blu-ray, it's very hard to tell between the Portmeirion sets and what is Portmeirion in a lot of the scenes. And that's another great thing about The Prisoner, isn't it? It's not just the acting, it's not just the great allegory, but the production design is
values.
Yeah.
Yeah, and then, amazing. So, just echoing what you said, absolutely quite right. Yeah, just dedication to the craft at every level, basically, isn't it?
It is, and you didn't always get that. I love original series Star Trek, but how many times can they go on a studio floor, put a couple of polystyrene boulders, and pretend it's an alien?
We're on planet Captain. We're on planet polystyrene yet again. Oh well, I must have left my communicator behind.
Yeah, exactly. Funny, interestingly enough, I think you mentioned this last week. I love how there are different stages to Rover. Rover can kill you, it can knock you unconscious, or it can just drag you somewhere. It's kind of like it's the big balloon version of a phaser, isn't it? It's phaser on stun, or it's shoot to kill,
or on kill. It's either lunch or bring it back.
I've not.
Which is why they called it Rover.
I'm very. I'm confused about Rover. I mean, happily, I guess, but it is a perfect example of a known unknown. It's never resolved what it is. But again, now I'm being more analytical for this show. I've realised my brain's going, all right, it was, it's slightly abstract, but it's still, set in, at the time, modern day, making it now a period piece, but in the UK. And so, it's not fantasy or science fiction. And now we've got this massive white ball every episode. So it's like, it's like James Bond, but with a massive floaty ball called Rover. And I realised I just kind of reconcile it like that in my mind, but I never, like you were saying earlier on the show, Cardinal, is it alien technology? This is the kind of thing that would suggest it would be a dream overall, even though I think it isn't. So I don't know. What the hell is Rover? Is it Russian technology? I don't know. And I realised I never resolved it. I just let it go. And it's that implication inference. Because I'm not going to do a headcanon on it. If I can't infer what I think Patrick McGowan was implying by Rover, then I guess we just accept it at face value. It's some kind of advanced technology, and they've got it, and we haven't.
Yeah, and whether that's because the world's governments have contributed to the village, or if it's a fantasy, if it's a dream, that's all part of the mystery of The Prisoner, which is why it's such a wonderful show.
And a great moment of serendipity. Can you imagine have you ever seen the footage of the original rover, the go-kart that they built? There is footage of it being tested in Port Merion on the first week's shooting. I can't share it with you now in any way, but it's on the 40th anniversary box set, and there's the original footage. Imagine if they decided to stick with that, and we didn't have the balloon, and instead you had this awful kind of thing that looks like a sort of fruit cake with a flashing light on top, driving around, hypnotizing the villagers. Visually, you wouldn't have got that. What you get from the balloon, which is, I think, a fantastic piece of visual imagery. It's so iconic, isn't it? Imagine if that was just a sort of a black and white striped go-kart, which is what they'd originally built, chugging its way around, herding villagers around.
Not quite as scary.
It's an accident that they ended up with the balloon. I think that's fantastic.
And all they really had to do was add that roar to the helium-filled weather balloon that's being pulled along with a monofilament, and it makes it really scary.
Good
and
audio effects.
Yeah, they wanted something that could go into the water, they could go into the air, they could go over the land. And I think, Rick, if they'd gone with the original concept, that just would have been kind of like an old Doctor Who set. It would have looked really wobbly and bad. And
I completely agree. And it's great that you mentioned there that the sound effects. I mean, they really worked hard on. This is what the minutiae that they went to create this show. It really does add. They originally started off with like just sort of a deep sea diver kind of heavy breathing effect. And if you watch the alternative version of the first episode, Arrival, and the alternative version of the second episode, Chimes of Big Ben, they do have that original rover sound of just a sort of deep sea breathing diver. That was just too organic, so they thought we need a roar. So it's a man screaming played backwards, while at the same time some balls are rolled around the inner tube of a tire, while at the same time a monk's chorus singing is played backwards. I mean, that's genius to put those three elements together to create the sound effect, isn't it?
Wow. Yeah, that's some Ben Burt level stuff right there.
Yeah.
And so, as part of the Arts and Crafts exhibition, number 6 is making a surreal art installation. And because he's not allowed tools, he uses a stone axe and stone chisels to make his piece, carving out wood from a log he felled. And he mentions, if I knew where I were sailing from, I could calculate where I was sailing to. So he makes 3 objects that look religious, but they're actually part of a boat. And I do have to stop here and say I do think Leo McKern is great in this episode. I mean, he chews the furniture up in this episode.
No, he's great. Absolutely fantastic.
He's probably the best number 2, which I always thought, which is why they brought him back, until Rick, you taught me that they shot those 2 episodes back to back.
Exactly right.
He is a very different number 2 in the other episode.
Yeah, and
we know why.
Yeah, well, Patrick McGowan simply turned around and said, I got Leo in, and I just thought he was so good. I then kept him on for the next one, and he wrote the next episode, thinking I'm writing it as a 2-hander with me and Leo McKern. So they filmed it back to back, Chimes of Big Ben and Once Upon a Time. And I think, as we said earlier on, I think the reason you get such a different performance is because Leo McKern is actually having a breakdown, and that's coming across in his performance. The character is having a breakdown, as is the actor performing the dialogue. Which
might have been exactly what Patrick McGowan wanted.
Yeah. And if you'd have, can you imagine any of the other number 2 actors coming back for Once Upon a Time? Brilliant as some of those number 2 actors were, it wouldn't have worked with any other number 2 actor other than Leo McKern to come back and be in one.
They do gel very well, and it does feel like a later episode. I must say, something you said earlier, Rick, I must say, at the beginning, everything you were saying, I was like, it's like he's reading my notes. So I have to say at the start, I had exactly the same thoughts, that because I'm equally obsessed with the viewing order, something we were discussing from the off. And you're right, it feels like a later episode, because what is ostensibly in this viewing order, which I freely admit came from my DVD, so it's my fault. But yeah, it feels like a later episode. He's already going to this counterpoint of first, you are the new prisoner. Now you'll be observing number 8. And it's like, hang on a minute, he just got here. So it does feel like a later episode. You were pointing out. It was filmed 5th, you were saying. So
it was filmed 5th. It was written to be an episode number 2. So there were 4 episodes that were written as episode 2. Yeah, there were 4 episodes written as episode 2. Checkmate, Free for All, Chimes of Big Ben, and Dance of the Dead were all written to be an episode 2, all from different writers.
Which I think is one of the reasons why it's not so important which order you see the first few episodes in.
I think that's absolutely correct. I think, and you said it was a very valid theory, Captain Cockney Spock, about our friend Tracy, saying it's not important what what order you view it in. I would absolutely agree. The first time you see the series, whether you watched it in the original broadcast order, which is your order is the UK broadcast order,
right,
or you watch it in the Channel 4 order, which is when I first watched it, and you first watched it, I think, in 1983.
Yes, right.
We both watched it in exactly the same order the first time around. Did we watch those episodes thinking this is in the wrong order? No, we didn't. We enjoyed the episodes and we didn't know any better. We didn't know which episode should be 2nd or 5th or 8th. Now, once you've watched it all and you then watch it again, then I think is the point at which you can say, okay, we can change the episodes around a bit here. I can make it a little bit more interesting by watching it as sort of canonical viewing order. Or if you're showing it to somebody else, you might want to play around and say, this episode works better 2nd, 3rd, or 4th. I mean, Dance of the Dead, he's clearly very new in the village. They're only explaining it to him in that episode that, he's dead to the outside world or whatever. He's clearly very new. Yet that episode is 7th or 8th. And as you say, you've got this episode 2nd in the broadcast order, even though it's quite clear that he's a little bit more settled. So if we're going to have
exactly, it feels more like an old hand.
Yeah, out of all the second episodes, this one is the one that I think comes last. I think either Dance of the Dead, Checkmate, or Free for All needs to come second, in my view, if you're mucking around with the order. And I'm glad you're not. It's great to see people just watching it in the order in which it was originally shown, which is the order that you've got there on your DVD set. The original UK broadcast order is exactly as you have it there in your. And I think that's the best way to watch it, because that was how it was originally shown. It might not have been intended to be shown in that order, but they had to show it in that order because, and I'll tell you why it's in the order that it's in. It's because only filmed 4 episodes in Port Merion, and they thought they're all episode number 2. We can't have them all at the start, because then 5 episodes in, there's no more Port Merion. It's all going to be studio for the next 10 episodes. So let's break it up. We'll put the Port Merion episodes 1, 2, 4, 8, 11. They broke up the Port Merion episodes just to make it visually interesting as you went along. You stick all the studio episodes together, the viewers are going to go, oh, I missed the village. Where's the village?
Right. Oh, that makes sense.
Now, number 8 claims that she knows the village is in Lithuania and that they can make it 30 miles to her people in Poland. And number 6 wins the arts and crafts exhibition and gives the prize to number 38. In exchange for this large tapestry with number 2 painted on it. And so they use his 3 art pieces and the tapestry to make a boat. And we don't know whether Nadia is in on it or not, but when they get out of range, they send Rover after them. And then they dive into the water and they swim for it. And they manage to make it to shore with the help of a sniper who shoots and hits Rover 3 times. But he's awfully hardy for a weather balloon. And because they make it to Poland, they make contact with number 8's people. Number 6 gives her a coded message to send to London. And then she asks him to be taken away. And number 6 trades watches with one of her people. And then they stow away in a crate. And they'll be taken by boat to Copenhagen and then by plane to London.
Now, as we find out later, it's one of those, I guess it's like Chekhov's gun, the watch thing. It's very subtle because you might just think, oh, okay.
Yeah, it's got seawater in it.
it is a plot point later. But from the point of view of the character within the story, is Six doing that on purpose, or was it simply generally that his watch was broken because of the seawater?
I think the latter. I think I think that as far as number 6's world is concerned, he needed a new watch. I don't think he was thinking, "Oh, are they up to something? I think I need a watch in a different time zone."
Yeah, that would have been a little too precog.
Okay, well, because I'm always obsessing about these again from a writing perspective, because that means that in story, it's basically that happening is a bit of luck for Patrick McGoon's character for number 6.
Yeah.
Okay, interesting.
And so, of course, they end up in his old boss's office in London, where the colonel asks him why he resigned.
Yeah, but this is something that we'll get to when the twist is revealed. But we do actually see we see them from their perspective. They're in boxes, and for all we know at that point, if it was filmed that way, anything could be happening, including nothing. But we see external shots of them being in a lorry. Obviously, it's stock footage or whatever, but and then being loaded on an aeroplane. And this is going to come up later. We do see them.
Could be flying around and around. Who knows?
Right, but they are actually on an aeroplane. I'm just mentioning it now because it's going to be relevant in a couple of minutes.
Number 6 notices the chimes of Big Ben strike 8, and it's the same time as on his watch, which means they're still in the same time zone, which is the dead giveaway that all his people in London are in the village and that they're in on it, and so is Nadia.
Dun, dun, dun.
And number 6 hears traffic noises, finds a tape recorder, turns it off, and walks out into the village.
The first time I saw this episode, I did not see it coming. Did you?
I didn't.
Absolutely not.
I've already seen it, and I didn't see it coming.
Yeah.
But that's brilliant, though, isn't it? So many times we watch these things, and that was obvious that was going to happen. I never knew this was going to happen.
Well, this is it.
That's the sign of a really well-written program, I think.
Well, for me, warning, devil's advocate, I'm going to say they overcooked it a little bit. I mentioned at the top of the show, basically, well, this is me overanalyzing writing. I think, yes, they did an absolutely bang-up job of making it a surprise, spot on Cardinal Sin. I've seen it before and it surprised me, but I think they went too far. I think, and again, I'm overanalyzing it, maybe, but this is why I'm sharing this with you now. I think if this... the internal logic of the show to go all the way back to the village, I don't think they'd bother getting those characters in a lorry on an aeroplane. If they'd gone that far, they may as well have gone all the way to London.
They have to make it. They have to make it seem like they're being taken.
Basically, for me,
by lorry and by plane. They have to take the requisite amount of time, and they have to move them around to make it seem like they're going there.
Well, for me, well, in my opinion, the general point I've realised through having these channels is that my initial reaction to any show, any movie, is subconscious. It's visceral. It happens in the stomach, and then I'll intellectualise it afterwards. But it was a bit one of those ones where there's a fine line between a twist and one where you go, oh, I've been cheated. The fine line is you've got to put the clues in there that the audience can go, oh, the clues were there, but I didn't see them. And I think they overcooked it with the stock footage of the truck and the aeroplane, because for me, it just doesn't make sense within the logic of the story. If they were going to get them on an aeroplane, they might as well have got them to London, because ultimately it failed because they weren't convincing enough. Well, if they were actually in London, that wouldn't have happened. But then, of course, we wouldn't have had the story. I just think
when number 6 walks out into the village,
that's my point. I just would have dropped the stock footage. I mean, I don't know. I mean, everything that we've analysed is dated.
We didn't actually see them go to London. We just saw them put the crate
that's not what I'm saying.
The plane.
Well,
but like I said, you have to make the people inside. You have to make the prisoner, number 6, feel like he's being moved around. He's got his watch, and so he's timing how long it will take. And she keeps trying to fall in love with him and trying to get him to fall in love with her throughout the episode when they're in this little box together. And it shouldn't be long now. And he keeps referring to time, knowing how long it's going to take to get there. So they're going through this long sort of shaggy dog story so that when he gets back home and everything looks the way it should, and all the people, who are there, the colonel is there, etc., and they ask him why he resigned, it'll just feel like what he's used to after being in the village and having gone through all these hurdles and all this kind of thing. And then at the end, Nadia puts on her coat and says to number 2, "You did your best," and she leaves the village. And then, of course, in the next episode, we'll get a new number 2, because number 2 has failed.
Do you know what I like about that last scene where she says that? It ties back to that earlier scene that we were talking about, where number 2 says, "Oh, I'm just as much of a prisoner as you are. We're both lifers." And this comes across with Nadia. Nadia is clearly the boss. She says, "You tried your best. I'll mention it in my report." And off she goes, sort of implying, "I'm over you. You're
so wonderful. I love that.
He's number 2. We supposedly think he's the guy in charge, but he really isn't. And we know later on that he definitely isn't.
You get your chance to, literally take a crack at cracking him.
Yeah, exactly. And that's why there's a different number 2 every week, of course, because, they each have a go. And even the ones that are fairly successful don't get a second chance. So you do wonder whether it's just a kind of conveyor belt of you get one go. And if you don't fully do it, even if you do quite well, that's the end of it. Only 2 people, obviously, Colin Gordon gets 2 goes, A, B, and C in the general. And Liam obviously appears in 3 episodes. No spoilers, don't worry. What's interesting as well is a little scene in the crate, and people miss this bit of dialogue, but it ties back later on. There's a bit where Nadia says, "Are you married?" Something like that, and he says no.
Mm-hmm.
He says,
and then later she asks him, "Are you engaged?"
Yeah, you engaged, yeah. And he doesn't answer. He just goes, "Will you go to sleep?" And that's interesting. Hold that thought, everybody, for later on in the series.
And even if we go back to Arrival, every time he asks a question, every time somebody asks him a question or goes off on a different tangent, starts a new sentence that has nothing to do with it. And then that's all there is.
One of my favourite episodes, though. One of my favourite episodes, Chimes of Big Ben. I'm so pleased that you invited me on to chat about it, this particular episode, because it is one of my favourites. I think if you took this episode out of the series would be a lot poorer. I think it's a good episode. I think the machinations of the village are kind of bubble up in this episode as well. It's nice to have things where you can get a little inkling of how the village universe works. I love where you go sort of behind the scenes and see the relationships between people behind the scenes in the village. So you get to see the supervisor talking to number 2 and how they kind of put their things together. And I think it's a really good episode, and it's been a pleasure talking about it. And thank you for inviting me on.
Absolutely. And actually, I was hoping, if you have time, you might give us some idea about what it was like remastering this show and other shows. You obviously have a huge physical media collection behind you. Can you give us some idea about what it was like, what your duties were, and what the network did to make these shows look and sound as amazing as they do?
Network are really the unsung heroes of physical media, of these types of shows, of archive shows from the 60s that were made in the UK. I don't mean sort of the modern shows where everything's filmed digitally anyway, and you don't need to make any improvements to them to really make them work. But shows of the 60s, so we think of The Saint. I don't know if you ever heard of a show called Randall and Hopkirk Deceased, which I think was shown as My Partner and the Ghost.
Oh yeah, I love that show. Yes. I own that show.
The Jerry Anderson shows, Stingray, Captain Scarlet, Thunderbirds, those great shows as well. They were all filmed on film, and the thing about film is that when VHS doesn't look like film. VHS is grainy. Film is beautiful when it's pristine. Film is beautiful. You can't beat watching something on 35mm film. I don't care what people tell me about DVDs or or whatever. Nothing beats watching something on film. Well, what network do is fantastic, and what they do is they reach out and find the original film negative, the original cans of film, opening the can and you get that vinegar smell where it's starting to go, and they run it frame by frame through the machine, and they clean up every little spot. And a guy called Jonathan Wood at the restoration team actually does the physical, he takes it through, and if there's a hair in the gate, he'll remove the hair, and he'll paint over the little spots that might appear. And that's what network do so well. And the amount of time they put into The Prisoner, and they're doing Secret Agent, by the way. They're doing Danger Man.
Oh, really?
Yeah, it's a very long, slow process. And the original film negatives, so many of them are in the USA, which means it's difficult and expensive to transport them over to the UK for them to be run through the machine. But they're working on it. They've done some of the episodes. They've done some half-hour episodes of Danger Man. They've done some of the hour episodes. And on the 50th anniversary Blu-ray release that I was proud to be a consultant for Network on and work on, that particular set, they did include on the UK release 2 Danger Man episodes, View from the Villa, which features Port Merrin, and Colony 3, which is the episode we talked about earlier on. Those 2 are now on Blu-ray on the 50th anniversary Prisoner box set. They were included as extras just to kind of show off the kind of work that Network are doing on the Danger Man episodes. But yeah, literally, you get the film, and Jonathan Wood and Tim Beddoes, the managing director, and Omar at Network as well. They literally, it's run through frame by frame. It's run through the machine. It's all beautifully cleaned up. So what you see, I mean, you press pause on one of these Blu-rays, and it is the most pristine, beautiful thing, isn't it? You can see every.
It's like a painting. Yeah,
it is, and it's absolutely. And I've been absolutely honoured to have been asked by Network to help in a small way with their releases. I'm not going to take the credit. Tim Beddoes and Jonathan Wood and the team at Network really do deserve all the credit for what they do, because they put in the time and the effort. I was simply the person that kind of advised them on various things, not so much to do with the restoration, but as I say, that the text commentaries and the content of the special features on the box sets was kind of more what I was involved with. But it's a pleasure to see them at work, and seeing the things projected on the screen. The original 35mm films that Network have of the episodes. It's an absolute pleasure to look through it. And one really pleasurable moment for me was that I've actually got the alternative version of the first episode, Arrival.
And I understand that there was an alternative version of this episode as well.
There is, but it was broadcast by accident in Canada, and someone taped it off air in the late 70s on NBC.
It's on YouTube.
And that's how it exists. Whereas the original version of Arrival exists on 35mm film, and there's only 2 copies of that in the world, and I'm very lucky to have one of those 2 copies. So if I had a projector,
you own a copy of the film?
Yeah, there's 2 35mm copies of the alternative Arrival, of which I have one. But I just don't have a projector to play it on, so I have to rely on him at Network to be able to show me these things actually on the big screen on 35mm film. But no, I can't get the credit for what Network as a company do. And without them restoring these shows, we wouldn't simply have them on Blu-ray. They would not exist on Blu-ray. No other company would have the time and effort to do that. They're not into making millions. They just want to get their money back on it and preserve these shows, because no one else is going to do it. No one else is going to take these old shows that no one apart from geeks like us remembers. No one else is going to put these through a machine and frame by frame tidy it up and take out the spots and the hairs and the scratches. Mm-hmm. Only Network can do that, and it was an absolute honor to be asked to contribute to some of the features on the Blu-ray releases.
And Michael Beacom asks you, Rick, I met Wade Williams, holder of many film rights, including Plan 9 from outer space, I imagine. The man has his own theater next to his house, a full-on theater, and thousands of films on actual film.
Wow, that's incredible. And Network are the same. They've got, I've seen some of the archive, and it's just rows and rows of films, a bit like the opening of The Prisoner, with the filing cabinets that go back for all eternity, and you can't see any further. It's like that, but with film. And it's great, isn't it, that there are still people out there that are interested in preserving film. And
Wonderful.
It breaks your heart when you hear that the BBC and people like that have lost episodes of Doctor Who because they were wiped or they were junked or they were put in landfill and motorways built on them, and films that we're never going to see again. I mean, it's heartbreaking, isn't it? So it's great. Companies like Network investing for very little profit their time and money in preserving these shows for us. Because, as I say, if they hadn't have done it, I don't think anybody else would. We got DVD releases of The Prisoner in the late 90s, early 2000s. They weren't really much better than the VHS, were they? But the Blu-rays, 2007 and 2017 Blu-rays, look absolutely stunning, and it's thanks to Network. And as I say, it's an honour to be associated with them. But I don't want to take the credit for being the person that hand rolled the film through and cleaned up, because that wasn't me. I was just very proud to be sort of a contributor and a consultant to the project.
And can you tell us exactly what it was that you did for the project?
Yeah, sure. So, and there's a few things. Firstly, on the box set, there is some behind-the-scenes footage from behind-the-scenes filming of several episodes. I located and found that film through my own sort of personal endeavors of trying to locate as much as I could from behind the scenes photographs on the set. I also contributed as well. The first Blu-ray set came with some viewing notes. I proofed those. And then the 50th anniversary box set, the thing I'm probably proudest of, there's a thing called text commentaries on each episode, where you can just, a bit like subtitles, but they're not just subtitling the dialogue. They're actually telling you how the scene was created, what's going on in the scene, all the continuity errors, all the changes to the original script. So you're getting a complete production story.
Now I'm jealous, because my Blu-rays don't have that.
You need to upgrade to the 50th anniversary set.
Do they have NTSC versions of that?
They don't, so you'd have to get yourself a multi-region player, I'm afraid, for those.
Yeah.
But it's every 8 seconds there's a different piece of information across all 17 episodes. So if you want to do the maths, there's about 8 per minute, 60 times 8. So what's 60 times 8? I have no idea. 480, something like that. So if you multiply that by 17, you've literally got sort of about 8,000 pieces of information across the 17 episodes, which I wrote and contributed to the sets.
That's
and again,
awesome. That's really cool.
I say I kind of acted as there was a few people that acted as sort of a consultant to the set. There's Stephen Ricks, who's done so much work with The Prisoner, Andrew Pixley, and myself, Simon Coward, and Tony Sloman, who worked on the series as a sort of film librarian, film archivist for the series itself. And we all worked as a sort of consultant to Network on the sets. It was more kind of an advisory role and creating and helping to create the special features and overseeing that sort of thing. And there's documentaries on both versions as well. 2007 40th anniversary set has a thing called Don't Knock Yourself Out, with interviews with the cast and crew. And then the 2017, and you'd love this, Cardinal, and you, Captain Cockney Spock. It's a film called In My Mind, and it's a film called In My Mind, made by Chris Rodley. And in 1983, Chris Rodley got the chance to interview Patrick McGoohan. Patrick McGoohan wouldn't fully play ball. You wouldn't expect him to, would you? And it's a documentary about trying to interview Patrick McGoohan, and it's absolutely fascinating. There's interviews with his daughter, there's archive interviews with McGoohan, and it's called In My Mind, and I sort of contributed to that documentary as well.
That's wonderful.
Check that out. I think that's on Amazon. If you look on, I think that's on Amazon Prime, and I think you have a Prime account, don't you, Cardinal? So
I do, yeah.
Look up In My Mind. It's called In My Mind. It's a
I'll do it now.
About Patrick McGoohan and The Prisoner. Watch that. I think you'll find it incredibly interesting, and you should see my name in the credits at the end, just in case you think I'm some interloper that's got into your podcast under false pretenses. I can assure you that's not the case.
No, I'm the interloper.
No, don't say that's your show.
Yeah, that's Captain Cockney Spock's business, directed by Chris Rodley.
Yeah, that's it.
Yeah. In My Mind, absolutely.
You would find that absolutely fascinating.
That is fascinating. Let's let everyone have a look here.
While you're doing that, an interesting point that Michael Beacon's made in the chat here, which I don't mind reading out. As a grade schooler, The Prisoner was my role model. As a sci-fi geek, I was a total outsider. It was me versus the 6th to 8th grade. I wouldn't give in and grovel to be popular. I was exactly the same. I first watched The Prisoner when I was 10 years old. No one else in my year was watching The Prisoner, I can assure you. They were watching The A-Team, and they were watching Nightmare, and they were watching Doctor Who, which were all great shows that I loved. But let's be honest, The Prisoner's on a different level to the Dukes of Hazzard.
Yeah,
was
quite
the kind
right.
of-
Yeah, absolutely.
And I was totally on mine. I'd go to school the next day and say, "Did anyone see The Prisoner last night?" And no one else would say yes. They go, "No, I kind of watched the kids' TV, and then I watched a comedy, and then I went to bed." And I'm thinking, "Oh no, you're missing out." And it's lived with me ever since. The Prisoner is a show that once you get it, it never leaves you. And
Yeah.
I'd like to think it teaches us so much about the life around us, but also teaches us about TV and how to make TV that throws down a gauntlet of this is what you can do with a television show. And yes, some people try.
Absolutely.
People have mentioned Lost and Babylon 5 and Sliders is a great example where you can make television that makes you think, but nothing is like The Prisoner. Nothing's ever followed it in the last 50
So Star Trek comes close in the movie when he says, "We must draw the line here," you know. But yeah, I mean, in The Prisoner, over and over again, they try to get into his head. They try and get into his mind. They you know, and as we were saying in previous episodes with Tracy Torme, that the whole thing is about McGowan's fear that the world was turning into a place that wasn't as safe as it used to be, which was not an unfounded fear. Everything in The Prisoner has come true. And it wasn't because of a coincidence. It was because he saw these things happening. He saw the surveillance state coming. He saw the rights of the individual giving way to the pressures of the state and the corporations. And that if they really ever wanted to find out what you think, what you want, why you resigned, all they would have to do is make you buy your own surveillance equipment, which we've all done.
Pretty much.
Yeah.
I mean, we're talking through them and listening through them right now.
Yeah, we are. It's quite scary how much of the village is around us, isn't it? Everything that's in that show. You mentioned it last week. Credit cards, cordless telephones, unheard of things really in 1966. You know, it looks pretty basic, but you know, in there's 2 episodes where he goes up to one of those information boards and presses a button. You know, where can I find this person? That's kind of early internet. You know, I want to know where this person lives. I want to know where number 2 lives. I want to know where this person is. I'm going to press a button, and this machine's going to tell me.
Like they say in Arrival, we have everything here.
That's right, and it's unsettling, isn't it, The Prisoner? Because especially watching it, I wasn't alive at the time it was made, so I didn't see it on its original broadcast. I've only seen it since in hindsight. And it's scary how much of modern society is there on screen 54 years ago before it's actually happened. It's quite unsettling when you analyse it.
That's why you might as well embrace it. I mean, in a way, that's why we're on YouTube. It's like, well, the NSA's watching anyway, so I might as well make my entire life public. I mean, ultimately, I plan to be on YouTube 24 hours a day, 7 days a week. I mean, I might as well. The governments are watching, so you might as well too. I mean, come on, NSA, let's have a super chat. CIA, put your money in your pocket. Come on, FBI, buy Cardinal a coffee.
The Truman Show is exactly that. The whole life is there. Shows like Big Brother, which, you know, I've enjoyed from time to time. Shows
well,
like
and I don't know, Rick, if you've ever seen Albert Brooks' movie Real Life.
Yeah.
That predicted reality television.
And
it was a joke. He was joking.
Yeah, and so much of these projects owe something to the Prisoner. There's a Nigel Neal play called The Year of the Sex Olympics from the early 1960s. Nigel Neal, who of course wrote the Quatermass character.
Oh, love Quatermass, yeah.
Yeah, he wrote a thing called Year of the Sex Olympics, which was basically the same thing. People laughing at people being watched 24 hours a day, killing each other, while the audience is lapping it up. And here we are today, and that's actually happening. You know, with Love Island and Big Brother and Survivor. And
they even made a Doctor Who episode when Christopher Eccleston was a doctor about that.
Yeah, he did. They did indeed.
I think I've underestimated.
Simon Pegg was the editor.
Yeah,
Simon Pegg. I think I've underestimated the effect the village has had on my own life. I mean, basically, I did have a job in London. I did resign. I now live in the village in an undisclosed location in New Zealand, and I've literally got a big white chair. I am number 6. I mean, my goodness, I think I've underestimated this thing.
It's scary in a different sense. How much this really appeals, in a sense, to everybody. It's we are all in the village. We are all the prisoner. And I think at least part of what Magoon was trying to say was that you do have to draw the line. You do have to throw the gauntlet down. You have to say this and no more, or they'll just keep, if you keep giving an inch, they'll keep taking a mile.
That's why it is for real. Cardinal, I even had that adventure where I went back to London 2 years ago. I'm just thinking, my watch wasn't out of sync at all. I wasn't back in London at all. I was in New Zealand the whole time. That wasn't traffic. That was a tape recording. Fuck.
Yeah. There's a line in... I wrote a book called The Prisoner, The Essential Guide some years ago. And
really?
There's a line in it that I think... I've always felt you could sum up I always tried to sum up The Prisoner in one line. And I did it as follows. The village is all around us, and we are all prisoners of ourselves. And that, I think, is what the series ultimately is.
Could you show it to us? I will make the screen big here, and you can show us the cover there.
There we go.
Memorize that one. The village is all around us.
It's only the village is all around us, and we are prisoners of ourselves. So that's
great.
A small book, but that's the book they sell in Port Merion when you go there, and people ask about the prisoner.
Really?
That's
wow. That's very cool.
It was originally going to be something which was going to go with the Blu-ray set, but in the end, Andrew Pixley wrote this book, which is The Prisoner, the Complete Production Guide. And it's a bit bigger than mine. Quite a lot of pages there. So I'll just put that up. So that's what came with the original UK Blu-ray box set. There's a big, thick book.
Nice.
Basically, I turned that into the text that we saw in the 2017 50th anniversary box set. I'm just so sorry that you chaps in America can't get. A&E had done a deal with Network in 2007. That's why the first A&E or first Shout Factory box set was released, because they did a deal with Network to say, look, Network, you've done all this fantastic work putting this into HD for us. Can we pay you lots of money to repackage it and sell it as our box set? Yeah, of course you can. Unfortunately, they haven't decided to do the deal for the 2017 box set, which is even more.
Rick, you may have heard me say this on a previous show, but by the time I knew that Shout Factory had this beautiful, pristine box set of every episode of The Prisoner on Blu-ray, they were sold out.
Yeah, there's so few of them. So few.
I think that's a crime.
I think it is, because you go on Amazon now and try and buy them secondhand. Even it's crazy prices, $100.
Oh, $500. When I tried to find it on eBay, it was $500.
Crazy. Well, what I say to everybody is if you love these shows and you want them on Blu-ray, just invest in a multi-region Blu-ray player. You can get them on Amazon now for $100 or so, and then just buy and import the box sets from the UK, because the releases are cheaper than in the US. The 50th anniversary box set with all the documentaries, with the Danger Man Blu-ray episodes on as well, is less than $2 an episode.
Wow.
By the way, just to say on a practical note, if there's any manufacturers out there, I'm in New Zealand, and regulars on my channel will know I've been on a 1-year mission to get a multi-region Blu-ray player in New Zealand. Cannot be done for love nor money. If that's wrong,
you're in the arse end of the world there, aren't you? So it's very, very difficult to get.
While we have you here, I'd like to go ahead and talk about your website a little bit.
Hang on a minute. I can't go, you're in the arse end of the world and unchallenged. It's not flat, it's round. We're at the top. How dare you?
Whoa.
That's the problem, though, is it? That is the problem. Subconsciously, these manufacturers go, New Zealand, it's the arse end of the world. No, there's a website for it. They don't even put us on the fucking map. Check any map of the world. New Zealand's not on it. We are the arse end of the world, and I'm telling you, the New Zealand Empire says we're tired of being seen as the arse end of the world, and I demand a multi-region player. Or why don't you just all cancel the region system? Do I have region restrictions on my vinyl? No, I don't.
Captain,
I'm the worst pilot in the world.
When your channel grows and becomes monetized, you will have the money to get a multi-region Blu-ray player. So, I mean, that's a given.
Done. I went to the shop, got a 4K player. They said we're going to chip it for DVD at source at the factory. It can play multi-region 4K, multi-region DVD, cannot do multi-region Blu-ray. I went to the shop, they chipped it at source, could not do the Blu-ray. I've got people on Twitter going, oh, you just push this button, click, click, click. It's a myth, can't be done. Someone send me a Blu-ray player that's multi-region. Thanks very much. Then I can watch
That's what I mean. That's what I mean. You'll be able to buy one from the United States.
Yeah,
I'll make it so.
New Zealand or New Zealand.
I will.
But anyway, I
make
just want
it
to put that
so.
out there. Manufacturer, can we cancel the region system? Because I like to support the industry by buying physical media, and I don't mind paying.
We're both big physical media fans, as are you, Rick.
Yeah.
And while we're wrapping up, can you tell us a little bit about your website?
Well, that's very kind of you. Thank you. So the Unmutual website it's www.theunmutual.co.uk. It's very nice to be plugged. It's the world's largest website dedicated to the prisoner in Portmeirion. I think it's got something like 3,500 pages of information on the website.
Wow.
E-subscribers, because there's no membership or anything. You don't pay any money, you just read, and if you want to get a monthly update, you can subscribe. I think there's about 7,000 subscribers on there now. But it's all the latest news. So if there's any events going on about the prisoner, you can find out about those. Anytime there's a book released, we'll put the news up on there. There's interviews with cast and crew. If you love continuity errors, bloopers, there's a list of those. There's guides to all the cars you can see in the series, all the locations you see in the series. Every time there's something to do with a DVD release, it's reviewed and
the joy of 6. I love that.
So anytime there's some news, there's obviously news there about the action figures that have come out recently. Anytime there's any news about the series or anyone's interviewed, it's put on the website. It's very kind of you to give it a plug. I wasn't expecting that, Cardinal Sin. You're a gentleman and a scholar, can I say?
Well, you've been wonderful to have as a guest, and I do hope that you will return.
Well, if invited, I would love to do so, and I hope that
yourself invited, sir.
I hope that your listeners don't feel I've taken over the conversation. I have a tendency to waffle.
So do we.
So do we. You're in good company.
You're in good company. I was just going to say that.
If invited, would love to come back. Thank you so much.
Absolutely. Consider yourself invited. My mod Antiderivative Jill has put the website up there, so please check out the website.
Thank you, Jill. That's very kind. And also, I will, because you've been very kind about Network and the work that they've done on the Blu-ray releases that I was a small part of. I will pass on your regards to them, because they love to get this good feedback. That's what keeps them going. As I say, they're not in it for the money. If they've made some fans happy with their restorations, then that's encouraging them for them to carry on. So the fact that you're happy with how they did the prisoner, it will be great.
As we said with Tracy, I think that not only do these look like they were made yesterday, but hopefully the show that we're doing and shows like this show are inspiring fans that have never seen the show before. And while you mentioned TOS earlier, Rick, I'm a big TOS fan. I've been a Star Trek fan since before I knew what Star Trek was. The whole ethos of Star Trek and all these shows that we love, they get lost because nobody cleans them up, and then no one will watch them because it's black and white, or it's got subtitles, or whatever the excuse is. There's no reason not to watch The Prisoner now, is there?
No, there isn't. And you see that with so many shows where they don't put the work in, and then a more modern, let's use a modern show as an example. I don't know how you feel about Buffy the Vampire Slayer. I love Buffy the Vampire Slayer. I thought it was a great show, but you don't hear it mentioned now. And the reason you don't hear it mentioned now is that they messed up the restoration they tried to do on it, and that's why the show doesn't get a mention now. Star Trek wasn't on that much for such a huge show with a huge following. Star Trek didn't get shown much in the last 10, 15 years up until they did the Blu-ray. They finally did the Blu-ray release. It took them so long to do a good restoration job on the original series. And so much has got lost forever now because they didn't invest the time and effort into it. And it's great that the companies like Network, Madman in Australia or another company, I'm sure there are American companies too that put in the time and the effort to restore these old shows.
Keen to Lorber and Arrow and
Arrow's a fantastic example. The work that they do, not only in restoring the films, but on the special features. I mean, I don't know if you know a film called Night of the Demon. They did a box set of Night of the Demon, which was enormous.
John Hurt.
And there's so many, great. Arrow that was a perfect example. Their rollerball release was utterly astonishing. A very Prisoner-esque film, by the way. Have you ever wondered why Jonathan in Rollerball is number 6? That can't be a coincidence, can it?
Very interesting. Very interesting.
I've waffled on again.
Ladies and gents, we've hit our 2-hour mark. So I do want to thank everyone that has participated in the chat. My good friend Clobby is here. Hello. And
Clobby.
Thank you again, Rick, for all of your help and all of your knowledge. It's been a real treat.
No, it's been a great,
please
been a great honor.
Consider yourself invited back every week.
Oh, bless you. I think your viewers will be punching the screen, thinking, no, not him again, because he doesn't shut up.
I think that would be wise. You clearly know your onions. I think you're the learned scholar that we need.
Yep.
Well, you're very welcome. I will be happy to pop along occasionally. I don't think I'll be able to make it every week, unfortunately, because of family and work.
Any week you can make it, we'll be happy to have you.
I'll love to. We can communicate over email behind the scenes, Carl.
Very good. Very good. And, of course, it wouldn't be I Am Not a Number if we didn't play this clip.
I will not make any deals with you. I've resigned. I will not be pushed, filed, stamped, indexed, briefed, debriefed, or numbered. My life is my own.
Is it?
Yes, you won't hold me.
Love that bit.
Quite right.
So for Captain Cockney Spock and Rick, it's Cardinal Sin, and we're out.